Welcome to Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. I'm Kristin Fields-Chadwick, your podcast coach on this transformative podcasting journey. Our mission: empower Kingdom entrepreneurs to confidently launch and grow podcasts, fostering a journey of being seen, being heard, being known, and making a lasting kingdom impact. This is Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. Your voice matters. Welcome. Yes, it is Christmas. As you are listening to this, it is Christmas Day, or you are listening to this after Christmas Day. If you're watching this on YouTube or on any of our Instagram or Facebook pages, you will see I'm in a tank top. You guys, in Colorado today, it is 64 degrees today. It might be snowing by the time it's Christmas, which typically that's what you think of Colorado. And I am wearing a tank top today because it is so warm in my office today. And this is what you get today. So welcome everybody. Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas to all of you. I want to say a big thank you to you for supporting this podcast by sharing and telling your friends in entrepreneur space, fellow coaches, other authors, speakers, and sharing holistic podcasting over these last 2 years. A big, big thank you. I am so very thankful for each and every one of the listens. Today, I want to announce what I have been doing behind the scenes the last probably 4 months. As a podcast coach, I tell my people to really dig in, refine, pivot where you need to, reevaluate, reflect. And I can tell you, I have done all of those things in the last 4 months. And really, most of all, being intentional through prayer and digging into data, really asking you, and especially inside of my membership and inside of my Facebook group, what your thoughts were. And today I'm going to share with you some of those big changes that are coming next week on January 1st, 2024. Here we go. Announcing our rebrand. We are going to be changing the name of this podcast from Holistic Podcasting to Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. And let me tell you the story behind this. So in September, the Lord gave me 2 words right after I got back from speaking at Spark Media Conference. And it was master and cultivate together, those words together. And I really was asking, what does that mean? And I was fasting, praying, and after a few months felt the Lord nudging me to lay down Holistic Hearts, which is my very first podcast that I started in 2020 of my own podcast. And it has been such a huge part of my world. It has blessed me beyond measure to share really what the Lord has been speaking and encouraging me to record and to host retreats. And what I sensed in this time of prayer and meditating and asking coaches and advice, and ultimately, Holy Spirit, what do I need to do in this season to master and cultivate? And one of the things that He really revealed to me was I needed margin and I needed to focus. And so one of the things that He's asking me is to lay down Holistic Hearts. So you can listen to that episode. I think it's publishing this week, but on Holistic Hearts podcast, I share a little bit more about that journey on that podcast. And it's time for me to lay it to rest, to lay it down. And it reminds me of when I first started in the podcasting world. I was a solopreneur. You guys, my brain. Right? I was a solo podcast producer for a very well-known podcast, and I was with them for 4 years. We helped all 3 of us. It was myself and 2 of my good friends. We started this podcast and we grew it to top 20 in kids and family. And it was a baby of mine. I mean, we started in 2016. We In 2020, it was a time where the Lord was asking me, "Hey, Kristin, I love what you did. You have done well. Do you trust me to lay it down?" And I did. I laid it down. It was a really hard decision. Some real grieving that that season was over. And we had so much fun together. And yet I knew it was time to lay it down and see the next thing that the Lord had for me. And so here we are, 2023, and we are walking into 2024. And I am laying down again a podcast that is near and dear to me and trusting that God has it in his hands. I know he will continue to bless that podcast. People can still listen to it and be blessed. And maybe I pick it back up in a year from now, but I do know that he's asking me to lay it to rest and to create some margin in my mind, my spirit, my heart, not only for my business, but also for my family, and to be present with them in this big season of life. We have 4 teenagers, and I know we don't have many more years with them in the home. And so I really want to be intentional about creating more margin. And so that means here on Holistic Podcasting, because Holistic Hearts is going to be laying to rest, I did feel another shift, which is I need to get more clear on who I serve. This led to some hiring of new coaches. I finished out my mastermind of 2023 and was really just seeking who do I need to have come alongside me and be an expert in something that I don't quite understand yet, or how do I go to the next level? And so I hired a guy that I know here locally who has taken ideas that were brilliant ideas and created multi-million dollar organizations. And so he is now coaching me through some areas that I really needed his input and his wisdom on how to grow. So I invested in a coach to help me navigate these questions of who am I serving and what is this impact that I want to bring to the table in 2024. I invested also in working through and refining more of my brand, my personal brand. And again, this is those questions is who am I called to serve and getting really clear on how I'm going to serve them well. And you guys know that I teach my podcasters, whether they've been in my boot camp or they're in my membership where they already have a podcast. When we start a podcast, you've got to know who your ideal listener is, right? So, one of the things is when your ideal listener comes on to Apple Podcasts and they're searching for an answer to their problem, what are they putting into the search bar? And so I started thinking about that in my own podcast. And what would be those things that you're typing in as you're looking for a podcast coach? What are those things? And I ended up asking my podcast membership group their opinion. I asked my Facebook group their opinion, which is some people are members, some people are listeners, some people just know me through networking groups. And so it was really good to get a bunch of feedback on what people would actually search inside of Apple or Spotify when they're trying to find a podcast coach. So, as I am thinking about the name, I just kept coming back to podcast coaching for kingdom entrepreneurs because that's what I do. Is I want to help kingdom entrepreneurs. And yes, I want to help non-believers and I want to help believers and I want to help all of the people who need help. But my main focus is to help you establish your voice, increase your visibility, help you be seen, be heard, be known, and to be able to do this in a way that is a step by step process and bring in Holy Spirit, invite him in as the core of all that we do here. So that's where the announcing of the rebrand has come in of podcast coaching for kingdom entrepreneurs. We are going to be continuing on talking about all the content that we have been talking about. There's a little bit of tweaks, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to talk about data and downloading your data on your podcast and getting feedback from your data. And a lot of that had to do with the name change, was seeing what is bringing people to the table, what are people sharing, what are people listening to. And I encourage you to do this with your own podcast. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let me backtrack a little bit. So again, announcing the rebrand of the podcast name is now Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. Okay, here we go. And the last actually, so sorry, I'm like looking at my notes, trying not to like totally look at the screen if you're listening to this. It's kind of a funny dynamic going on right now. I'm trying to look at my notes, make sure I don't forget anything. Okay. I am practicing what I preach, which is stepping out and doing something brave, which as you heard, I am doing a video now along with my audio. I want to be an example of doing the brave thing, right? Okay, moving on. I did want to mention that we are going to continue helping entrepreneurs launch their podcast through one on one coaching packages where I personally walk you through each step in the process of launching your podcast. And we are going to continue to have podcast boot camp probably twice this year, January and probably in October. So our next launch of our cohort, where it's an 8-week program where we walk you through 8 weeks of how to launch a legit podcast well with excellence. As a kingdom entrepreneur, you want to do this well. So that is why I created this 8-week program that we tried out last year. We have refined it. I now have a co-coach with me, Megan Nielsen, who is helping me with breakthrough coaching and really helping refine and wordsmith, helping write that copy for your podcast. She is an amazing addition to the podcast bootcamp. So you not only get me as your podcast coach and expert, but you also get an alumni of the podcast bootcamp who is an incredible kingdom life coach who will help you clarify your message as we go through this process. So don't forget, January 1st is the cutoff date for registering for our bootcamp. We start January 11th. We want to make sure you have enough time to order your equipment if you don't have it already and to get you all situated for our 8 weeks together. We already have some spots filling up, which is awesome. I cannot wait to hear these brand new podcasters in 2024. And yes, there is a spot for you at the table. Yes, yes, yes. All right, let's keep going. Just as with any podcaster, I've seen a lot of growth in this past year and even 2 years of starting this podcast. And I really started this podcast as holistic podcasting because I wanted it to go hand in hand with my podcast management business. I knew I was helping coaches, I knew I was helping entrepreneurs, and I really wanted to have something where they could listen to while they're trying to build their podcast. There was a lot of beginner podcasts in 2020, and then 2021 is when I first launched holistic podcasting. And I wanted to be sure that there was help for those that are growing their podcast. That's where holistic podcasting came in. It was an offshoot of Holistic Hearts, which was more of like spiritual life coaching. And it's just neat to see where it's grown in the last 2 years and really transformed into more specifically who I help, how I help, and yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Okay. So as I looked back over this year alone in 2023, we have launched over 17 podcasts this year. I actually did a post, I think it was about a week ago, and I said 16. but then I realized I forgot one that was on a different drive of mine. And I was like, oh, actually, it was 17. So pretty awesome. We got to help 17 podcasters launch a brand new podcast this year, which is amazing. We have managed over 8 podcasts throughout the year. They've been previous clients, and just consistently being able to amplify all of these amazing, incredible voices. We have launched our monthly membership, our podcast membership for graduated podcast boot campers and anybody who is a current podcaster. We have developed that membership into a monthly coaching and check-ins and accountability and training to help you reach new people, to fine tune your social media skills, to learn about paid advertising, to learn about how you can create income through your podcast, and not to mention one of the coolest parts, which is collaboration with other like minded women who are hungry for just solid connections. And here in that group, it is just a beautiful way to connect with other like minded women who are kingdom minded. They are just gems of people. As I think about the people that are in there, it really just makes me smile. Let's see, reflecting back again over this year, I've been able to speak at multiple events, including creating some of our first in person business retreats, again with Megan Nielsen and my dear friend Hallie Foote, and then was able to speak at a Dream Podcast Conference of Spark Media Conference. And that was in September, which was really such a gift to be in the room and to meet some of my all time favorite podcasting mentors like Dave Jackson and Alex Sanfilippo, and meeting them in person. It just takes it to a whole nother level when you get to actually meet the people that you have been mentored by, right? It just takes it to a whole nother level. And then rounding out the year is I was able to co-lead a retreat with Megan Nielsen again in her Advent retreat called The King is Coming. And that again, it was almost 30 women in the room, and what a gift to speak and to really host an environment to allow the Holy Spirit to come in and speak to women all over Colorado Springs that were just hungry for peace and experiencing his presence. So, so fun reflecting over what God has done this year. And I really encourage you, as you're listening to all of this, I really want to stoke the idea in you to go back and reflect. Inside of our podcast membership, we actually did this. We had a workbook that we walked through, and we thought about the things that God has done, the doors that He's opened or shut, and just being mindful of what has happened in the last 12 months of your world. I know one of the biggest things I did about a year ago was invest the biggest amount of money on myself in my business than I ever have. And it actually was monumental in me stepping into a place of authority of I'm spending this much money. I know that this is worth it. I am worth it. My business is worth it, and you all are worth it for me to take myself to a next level so I can serve you better. Another thing of reflecting back is one of my favorite values is connecting with people. Connections is top priority for me. And specifically in podcasting, it's a little tough because you're kind of just talking to a screen, or maybe you don't have a screen in front of you. You're just talking into Audacity or GarageBand, and it can feel a little lonely. And so that was why I started the podcast membership. That was why I really tried to hone in on our Facebook group and reach out to you on Instagram. And so it's been really fun to connect one on one with so many of you and to hear your hearts, to hear not only what is going on in your podcasting world, but really what's that message that God has called you to. I've loved the interactions on Boxer with so many people regarding podcasting, and it usually transforms or develops or blooms into other topics in life. And I just adore that. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of that. Okay. Now, another thing with reflecting is I encourage you, if you are watching this video, literally print out, you can see right here, I printed out on Libsyn. If you have Libsyn, and I'm sure on any other platform too, you can print out your episode download numbers. And for me, it prints out all of my shows. And I actually just did this for one of my clients too. And I take a highlighter and then I go through and I mark the top 5 episodes of this past year. And I really go through and I think about and I wonder why. Okay, why did this episode get this many download numbers? And really just start to think on it. Meditate like what is happening here that these are the top 5 episode numbers. So I'm just going to run through an example of my own, and I encourage you to do this on yours. So again, like I said, there's nothing like printing out an actual document and highlighting your download numbers so that you have it in front of you. I'm such a I don't know what that called, kinetic learner, that having something on paper in front of me to see it is so helpful for me. Otherwise, it's just too out there and ethereal. So print out that download numbers, put get your highlighter out, notice and write down your top 5 episodes. For you, my listeners with holistic podcasting, number 1 episode was podcast burnout, episode 69. How to reignite your podcast. More than double any other show this year. And that tells me, do you know what that tells me? There's a lot of podcasters that are burnt out. And that means I am going to be focusing on this next year on a lot of topics on burnout or the cause of burnout so that we can help you not be burnt out. Again, this is going to be so helpful for you as you are looking at your podcast numbers over this past year. And if you're not there yet, maybe you just launched or you're launching in January, know that this is coming at the end of the year. You're going to get feedback, I promise. Number 2 on my list was episode 68, which was why your podcast might not be growing. So this tells me that there is a lot of podcasters out there that are seeing either a drop in numbers or it's stagnant or they're really struggling with growth opportunities. And this right here is something that I personally have been watching my own show do as well. And I really want to get to the bottom of this. And that's partially why I am switching my podcast name to actually go more narrow. The more specific, the more terrific. That's what Rory Vaden says on on the Brand Builders group. And I love that because I think there's multiple reasons why podcasts don't grow. And it's really finding a coach that can come in and help you fine tune those theories of why your podcast numbers may not be growing. Now, this is really important after a year. I would say even 18 months. I have told people 18 months, don't start judging your podcast until about 18 months. And that's really when you can start to get the data from your people. Like this, I'm going into my 3rd year. So I can be able to look at this and go, okay, interesting. People want to know about podcast burnout, how to prevent that, and podcast growth. All right. So now my number 3 is why you need to join our podcast bootcamp, which is really fascinating. So I guess my guess would be that people wanted to listen to what was the podcast boot camp. And that's awesome. You can keep listening to it. If you're interested in the podcast boot camp, I do encourage you to go listen to episode 67 because it is a great episode, kind of highlighting what is the reason that you would join the podcast boot camp to launch your podcast. Okay. Number 4, Episode 63 is podcast procrastination. Now, this one I had a guest, and I remember she was very good at promoting the episode. She was all over TikTok. She was very thorough on sharing. And I really want to hit on um, in 2024, I want to hit on guesting and how to treat your guest and get the most out of having somebody on your guest as a guest on your show, because we might have a lot of missed opportunities if we're not careful. And so, interesting with that one, podcast procrastination. I think the reason why that number was so high was because she shared it, and I knew she shared it and she had material to share it. The number 5 is episode 58, where I basically wrote a letter to my new podcasters who had just finished my podcast boot camp. And it was just an honest letter to any new podcaster out there, an honest and encouraging letter to just help you keep going and some advice. So I just thought that was cool to go through the top 5 and really digest and dissect the reasons why maybe those were higher in download numbers than others. So go back and do this for yourself. Now, like I said, to be honest, and I want to be honest with you, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have 100,000 downloads. I don't. Holistic Hearts had a lot of downloads. It did not have 100,000 downloads. It had, I think the last I checked, it was 35,000 downloads after 3 years of podcasting. And that was like a couple times where I actually didn't podcast for like a summer or something, which blows my mind. It exploded during the summer that I didn't record. But this right here is what I want to say is our total download numbers for holistic podcasting has been tiny. Now, I could sit here and be down in the dumps and say, why am I so little? And I know a lot of you have just started a podcast and maybe you are discouraged on your numbers. And this is where we ask Holy Spirit, what am I missing if I am missing anything? Or is it my perspective? I think there's multiple things as I'm sitting here and asking about what happened with holistic podcasting because it took a big dip in September through December. I had a lot less downloads. And to be honest, I think there was a couple of things. One is I needed to get clear, go back to the drawing board. Who am I serving? And secondly, is I really needed to get some stuff off my plate. I was stretched too thin. The grace to do both podcasts was no longer there, and I needed rest. And so, hence the reason why I'm laying down Holistic Hearts and now really just focusing in on podcast coaching for kingdom entrepreneurs. The other thing, too, and I'm still learning, you guys. I mean, this is, as I'm recording it, it's December 19th, about 6 days from when you are listening to this, or a little bit later. And it's just good to go back to the drawing board and say, where do I need to fine tune? And coming back to those 2 words that Holy Spirit gave me in September is master and cultivate. So, how do I create content that is valuable the whole show through? How do I edit so that it's cutting out the fluff that maybe you don't need to hear? How do I find the guests that are actually going to bring you value and they will share the show and increase the audience and bring more value and serve you better? All these questions are so good to ask and reflect. I say this as a humbled podcast coach, where in my own show, I am watching my numbers. They took a dip this year. However, I'm so glad it did because it's allowed me to come back and really rethink and get clear so that I am fully confident that it's going to take off in 2024. So there's that. There's my humble confession. Now, podcast management clients, I legit just downloaded Kristin Boss, who's one of my podcast clients. She's got 3 million downloads. 3 million downloads almost. She's like this close. Enough to where I was like, I am such a proud producer or manager of your podcast that you have 3 million downloads. We have been with her since day one when she had one listener, and now it's at 3 million. And I asked her what her advice would be to any podcaster. And I feel like this could be a whole episode in itself. And I love what she said, which was momentum. Ooh, let me find it. Hold on. Momentum. Okay, momentum happens because of consistency. So I want to encourage you to keep going. This is spoken from somebody who has 3 million downloads, who I'm sure has had moments where she has not wanted to record. Momentum is all about consistency. You're going to get there. I have seen it with multiple podcasts and continue to serve. I go back to the connection piece. I would rather connect with the hearts of you as a kingdom entrepreneur and know you personally and know your heart than to grow my download numbers if it means missing you. And that is my heart. And I feel like the Lord reminded me of that as I was preparing for this episode today of remember, I created you to connect with your people. And not that a top podcast would not be able to do that, but a reminder that, like the saying of small acorns do big oak trees grow, right? We got to stay faithful in the little. Okay. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your friendship, for your time, for entrusting me with some of your podcasts and getting them launched, managing your podcast. And today being a Christmas day, or this week is a Christmas week, the most important thing is that we connect with who Jesus is. He is Emmanuel, and He is a part of our lives, and He wants to be a part of every aspect, including your podcast. And He has given you a voice to use and declare life. Isaiah 60, verse 1 through 2 is this whole business's foundational truth. And it is arise and shine, for your light has come. And I want you to hear me that 2024, rise up, be visible, be seen, be heard. I don't know what this upcoming year is going to look like, but I know we serve a big God who has called us to shine brightly in this world. And we have hope to bring to the table. As we move forward, I want you to hear some of my goals for this podcast, for my business, so you know where we're headed. So I want to help launch at least 20 more kingdom entrepreneurs into this world of podcasting. I would love that to double. Last year we had 17. Let's make it double. Let's do it. So that means for me, I need to show up visibly in places that I know my potential people that are just waiting for someone to be like, yes, do it. I need to show up. I need to invest in business coaching, in courses that are going to help me go further, farther. I'm going to be strategic about that. So it's not just the next shiny thing, I'm going to look for speaking events for entrepreneurs, authors, writers, and I'm going to collaborate with my fellow people that are doing awesome things through podcast guesting, through collaborating in summits. And I'm so excited to do this with other people. I'm looking forward to serving my podcast membership group throughout the whole year. We're going to walk through the podcasting journey, really highlighting on giving you some tools to take your podcast to the next level, to help you grow, to help you monetize. And I'm going to be continuing to offer pod classes every month to anyone who has a podcast. You don't have to be a member. The pod classes are for people to attend just to get some training for your podcast. Something a little bit different as we move forward into 2024 on podcast coaching for Kingdom entrepreneurs is that you're going to see a little bit more interviews than I did this past year. And there's a few reasons why I'm doing that, but I also am strategically picking guests to be at a certain time and knowing that they are going to bring value. The people that I have chosen are people that I admire, that I know and trust and value their opinion in this space, whether it's marketing, coaching, PR. Y'all, these interviews are fire. Next level. It's going to take you to the next level. And I didn't just pick anybody. I am very intentional about who is coming on my podcast. And I'm going to be bringing some specific solo episodes too. Like those conversations that I just had, or not conversation. I didn't have a conversation with you, but I was just telling you, looking at my numbers, I know y'all are interested in burnout, podcast growth, and launching a podcast. So those are the things I'm going to really be focusing on my solo episodes. I'm going to be answering your podcast questions. So don't forget to come inside of our Facebook group and ask those questions. Reach out to me personally. Send me an email. If you don't want to write it in the group, send me a personal message. I would love to hear your podcasting questions. There's lots of things changing. AI is changing the way that we're doing more video now, the latest stats on YouTube, all of those things. Bring those questions to me. And of course, above everything, I want you to lean into what the Holy Spirit is bringing to your heart for the person that you are called to serve. And I love this other quote from Rory Vaden. Don't start with why, start with who. Don't start with why, start with who. So again, asking the Holy Spirit, who are you called to serve in 2024? So take this time, this upcoming week, as most of us are on break, and just really reflect and look back at your download numbers, download that sheet, ask yourself those questions, ask the question that even Jesus asked, what do you want in 2024? And as we are closing out this year, I really want to extend and ask to you, if you know somebody who is wanting to start a podcast or they have a podcast and they have not heard this show, would you share one of your favorite episodes with them? It doesn't have to be this one. I know this one's kind of more for my listeners who've been listening for a while. So look back at the year. What episode brought you peace or gave you clarity or gave you a strategy or was super helpful in your own podcast? And send it to somebody that you know could benefit from listening to that episode. I would so love that. Last year, I know I did on here a Christmas episode where it was like, bless the podcaster by doing this one thing. And it was about sharing a podcast with a friend today. It's like a love language. Like when friends send you a song and they're like, hey, I was just thinking of you. Here's a song, or old mixtapes. This is a way to bless a podcaster and to show your friend or your business partner or a fellow coach that you are thinking of them. Share this podcast, share another podcast, somebody in our community podcast. Share the love. And don't forget that I will be doing a free webinar December 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, on how to start a podcast in 2024. I'm going to go over the 10 steps that I've been sharing on social media on how to start a podcast. And I'm going to be opening up 15-minute free coaching December 28th and 29th, just in the morning time frames, and would love to help you kickstart 2024 well. So thank you again for listening to Holistic Podcasting, which is now going to be podcast coaching for Kingdom entrepreneurs. And welcome to this new level of branding. And remember, your voice matters. Be brave. Take those steps to launch and grow your podcast. Your voice can change the world. Use it to spread love. joy in the message that everyone belongs at the table. All right. Links are below for those webinar registration and the free coaching 28th and 29th of December. I love you guys. I will see you in 2024. Thanks for listening today. Hey, I want you to know that there's an opportunity for you and I to connect. I would love to do that. Find a link below and we can schedule a one-on-one free 15-minute consultation. I want to hear, where are you in your podcasting journey and how can I help serve you and help you bring that kingdom impact dream into reality?